Welcome to today's Ethnic Media Services Zoom News Conference. I'm Pilar Marrero, Associate Editor of EMS. Today, we will talk about how LA is launching a national model for park equity. In the past few years, LA has plunged in a national ranking of park systems in the country's largest city, 88 out of 100. In a city already grappling with huge issues of inequality, the lack of equitable access to green spaces and parks lies at the heart of the problem. Addressing it will take a technological, state-of-the-art approach and an unprecedented push to speak to Angelenos of all stripes to offer their ideas for solutions and priorities. Why is park equity a key concern for public health officials today? What caused the decline? And how does LA's park system compare to other cities? This briefing will offer a front row seat to the effort that LA is about to embark on, which could become a model for the nation. Our panel includes Jimmy Kim, General Manager of the LA Department of Recreation and Parks, Jessica M. Henson, partner at OLIN, Francisco Romero, Program Manager at Prevention Institute, Roxy Rivas, Deputy Director of Capital Projects and Planning at Pacoima Beautiful, and our friend John Christensen, Adjunct Assistant Professor at the UCLA Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. We ask speakers to speak slowly for our interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean. And we ask reporters to enter questions in the chat. Our speakers are also encouraged to answer questions throughout the conference in the chat if they are able to. We will send a video of today's briefing and expanded bios with contact information for each speaker to all participants later today. Today, we will let all speakers present and then have questions and discussion. Please write your questions in the chat as they occur to you, and we will pick them up at the end of the presentations. And then with this, let's go right into it. We will start with Professor John Christensen. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here today to join in this really important and exciting conversation. I'd like to share some slides with you. Can you all see that okay?
Yes, we can. I can see it.
Excellent. And how about if I go like that? Can you see that still?
It remains the same size, I think.
Okay.
Well,
I wanted to give you a brief overview of the LA park system. I know others will also talk about this, and especially Director Kim of the Department of Recreation and Parks. But just wanted to give you an orientation and an overview from my perspective of the park needs assessment by grounding us a little bit in the park system and in the history that has led us to where we are. So the city of Los Angeles owns and operates over 100 parks sites. 16,000 acres of parks and 92 miles of trails all around the city of Los Angeles. This is a really neat visualization of that data. We've got several large parks, including the, I think, world famous Griffith Park, the largest in our system, and then other Sepulveda Basin and others, and then many, many, many small neighborhood parks that are vital to the neighborhoods and communities that they're in. I think as Francisco Romero will talk about, those parks are, having a park within walking distance of your home is highly correlated with positive health outcomes and vital to the health and well-being of neighborhoods and communities. As Pilar mentioned, Los Angeles is now number 88 out of the 100 largest cities in the country in terms of its park score. The park score is compiled by the Trust for Public Land, and it looks at the 100 largest cities in the country, how they're doing in terms of the acreage of parks per thousand residents in the city, the access that people have to parks. Do they have a park within walking distance of their home? The investments that the city is making in parks, the amenities, and then equity. LA was number 49 just in 2020, 5 years ago, and has dropped to number 88. And that's because really of two factors, two major factors. A lot goes into this, but those two factors are a lack of relative lack of funding and investment, which is made more urgent by we're losing one of our main funding mechanisms, Proposition K, that has delivered up to $25 million a year in funding for parks, expires next year. The other major factor is equity. There, 37% of Angelenos don't have a park within walking distance of their homes, a half mile or a 10-minute walk. But that figure is 73% fewer in low-income communities have access to a neighborhood park within walking distance of their home, and 66% fewer in neighborhoods of color. And that's another major reason why Los Angeles has dropped in the standings, is because of that inequity. Trust for Public Land just introduced that equity metric in 2021. And that explains a lot of the decline in the last several years, in addition to the decline in funding. 2 years ago, the city council put a measure on the ballot to try to replace some of that funding that we're losing from Proposition K next year. But it failed at the ballot. And mostly because it was not a very specific, detailed proposal for how that funding would be spent around the city. And this follows a similar pattern as the County of Los Angeles, which put a similar ballot measure before the voters, and it was defeated before the county then went back and did a very comprehensive park needs assessment, and based on that, put a plan in front of the voters that centered equity, and that passed in 2016. There's an urgent need for a clear assessment of the need for park improvements, to address a backlog and deferred maintenance of $2.1 billion, and to assess the amenities, to assess the need for parks, and put a clear funding measure before the voters that would build on the example of Measure A that passed at the county level. And so what the city has now done, the Department of Recreation and Parks, is create with the leadership of OLIN and a team of consultants. I'm one of those consultants on this project that is led by Jessica Henson at OLIN, to embark on a state-of-the-art, best in the field park needs assessment. I've studied these kinds of park needs assessments and funding measures around the country, and I can say with confidence that this is really a best in the field nationally, and will be an example for other cities across the country. It has four major elements that I'd like to point out for you. The first is that it's taking a rigorous data-driven analytical approach. You can see some of the data that is going into this park needs assessment, which is just launched this week, from heat island severity to tree canopy cover, to unemployment and housing burden, and habitat values, pollution burden, and all kinds of other data to really assess what is the need for parks. How can parks contribute to alleviating some of these concerns in neighborhoods and communities? and providing the benefits of parks to all the communities across Los Angeles. The second element where this is really state of the art is it combines, with that data-driven analysis, an incredibly robust community engagement process all over the city in multiple languages, from traditional meetings to a community partners program with community-based organizations, to a statistically valid survey, tribal outreach, all kinds of outreach. Is just going to be amazing over the next several months as this rolls out across the city to create a really community-informed and community-driven plan that will ultimately have the community support for a funding measure that will need to be approved by the voters. The third element of this that I'd like to point out to you that is really a leading example, for these kinds of park needs assessments around the country, is that it will center equity and climate resiliency. That it will center prioritizing lifting up the communities that currently don't have access to parks, that tend also not to have tree canopy, and have historically not seen these kinds of investments, and focusing on prioritizing those. And it continues to put climate resiliency in an era of global warming and climate change also at the center of among other priorities. And as you can, as everyone here knows, this is quite a contrast to the conversation that we're seeing at the national federal level right now, where those two words, equity and climate resiliency, are being stricken from many federal agencies' agendas and priorities. And it's great to see Los Angeles continuing to stand up and uphold these very, very important priorities and values. And finally, this park needs assessment. So the fourth element of it that is really kind of groundbreaking and leading is it'll provide a roadmap for prioritizing investments for years to come. So to make sure that we are really prioritizing our investments where they're most needed first to benefit the most people in communities like those that you all report on, and that this will be an example for the nation. And with that, I'd like to stop my sharing and thank you for being here, and just underline how important the work that you're all doing to bring these kinds of stories to your communities.
Thank you, John Christensen. Let's move on to our second speaker, Jimmy Kim. He's the general manager at the Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks. Mr. Kim, please go ahead.
Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this media briefing. My name is Jimmy Kim. I'm the General Manager for the Department of Recreation and Parks. I want to start off by saying, our parks are critical infrastructure. They provide essential services, environmental benefits, and they also contribute to the quality of life for all Angelenos. Being a person that lived in LA all my life, I've been with the Recreation and Parks Department for my entire adult life. So I've been with the department for 28 years. So I know how important our parks are to our communities. But as we face increasing climate challenges that are happening now, including the recent traumatic fires that we experienced, the need for well-maintained and strategically developed parks is more urgent than ever. I want to mention that the Parks Need Assessment Project is a generational project. It's really designed to shape the future of our parks for the next 25 years and beyond. The last full assessment we did was about 15 years ago, but our city, it's changed a lot, right? So we're really planning for the future. So I want to say that the PNA, the Parks Need Assessment, is a comprehensive evaluation of all of our park spaces, all 16,000 acres of public parkland and amenities that we have. And it really aims to understand what we need now, as well as what the future recreational needs and park needs will be for our diverse communities, right? So as we do this assessment, it's going to help us, or it's going to produce a decision-making framework for the city that will guide our department in prioritizing investments, how we allocate resources, and how we make sure that we're being inclusive, accessible, and transparent in our process. So as the general manager of Recreation Parks, I encourage all Angelenos that utilize our spaces to participate in this project. Again, we'll be hosting OLIN, the group the consultation group that's going to be leading this effort will be hosting over 82 events throughout this period. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that they should participate, because this is really for our future, not only mine as an Angeleno, but also everybody else as well. So I'll pause there.
Okay, Mr. Kim, thank you so much for being with us and for that presentation. And let's move on to Jessica Henson, who's heading this project.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a real privilege to be able to talk to you all and appreciate the work that you are doing to get news to all of the communities of Los Angeles and across the country and around the world. My name is Jessica Henson. I'm a landscape architect and planner. I'm a partner in charge of our office here in Los Angeles called OLIN, and we are leading a team of experts to complete the park needs assessment on behalf of the city. It's a really exciting challenge over the course of this year to bring together the diversity of the different communities of the city in a way that reflects and celebrates that diversity and celebrates how important parks are to our lives. As John mentioned, the city owns or operates over 500 park sites, 16,000 acres, and these parks are a critical part of the lives of Angelenos, part of our day-to-day living, and really change our quality of life significantly. Parks make life better. They contribute to our health and well-being, as well as our recreation, our children and youth, our seniors, and some of our most disadvantaged communities as well. The team of experts that are working on this project range from scientists and engineers, architects, social science specialists, ecologists, recreation specialists, and park specialists, as well as people that are specialists in engagement and reaching other communities that maybe don't always have their voice heard. And we are really looking forward to making this parks needs assessment one of the best in the field, to be a national model for how park systems can prioritize equity when there are diverse needs around a community like we have in the city of Los Angeles. Living in Los Angeles myself, I use different parks in our system every day, so I know how important they are to all of you as well. I want to share just a couple of slides here that might help contextualize this, picking up from where John left off. During this assessment, we're going to be looking at a lot of different types of information and data. We're going to look at social equity, climate, environment. We're also going to look at things like recreation, how many different amenities like basketball courts or baseball fields or soccer fields different neighborhoods have, how far you have to go to get to them, and how many people are trying to use the same amenities. We're also going to be looking at the lived reality of the local geographies of Angelenos. So we recognize that not every neighborhood is the same and not every community needs the same thing. So we'll be working closely with council districts and neighborhood councils this year to understand what some of the unique needs of the very diverse communities are. If you want to follow along with this process, which I hope you will, there are 4 steps that we're going to be going through during this year. Right now, we're in the phase that we call grounding. This is where we're trying to gather up a lot of information and get information out to communities. So we really appreciate opportunities like this to brief all of you. When we get later in the spring into May, June, July, and August, we're going to move into the evaluation phase. This is where we're going to be taking a lot of the knowledge that we gain right now through surveys and conversations, and we're going to be using that to evaluate what the park needs are. And then this coming August and September, we will have a draft of the park needs assessment that will be available online for people to see. And then at the end of the year, we'll be finalizing the final P&A. You can get involved at all of the steps of this process. There's a website where we're going to be tracking this. There's many languages available, so it's multilingual. There's a survey that we would love for you to take that you can take in many different languages online as well. Please check this out. Please encourage those that are listening to this briefing and that might hear your stories to take the survey, because it's really foundational that we hear from the diversity of communities in the city for this process to reflect all communities and not just specific neighborhoods or specific ethnicities or specific communities around the city. Having this, I'll show you the website in a second, just so that everybody also knows that that's there. We are also having a whole host of events. General Manager Kim mentioned this over the course of the year. We're having over 80 different things that you can come to. The first set in early March has been scheduled, and we are certainly inviting different communities to come. You can come to any of these. These are all going to be similar. There are 8 different opportunities and geographies around Los Angeles. And please come help us understand what your park needs. I also want to just show everyone the website. I hope you can you see that website there? Did it come up? Maybe not. Let me just share again here to make sure I can share this. Here we go. The website is available at needs.parks.lacity.gov. That's in some of the materials that you have, but we'll also make sure it's in the chat. People can go to this website. It is available to be translated into a lot of different languages. It has information on upcoming events and how to get involved throughout this year. And you can also sign up for project updates. We really are excited to be undertaking this this model in park equity, park access, parks needs, to be able to really chart a course for the future. As both John and Jimmy mentioned, prioritizing park needs is really essential for how funding gets designated and how decisions are made and priorities are set. So your involvement now in this project is critical to being able to chart a course forward for rec and parks that will continue to make this park system a globally significant park system that is meaningful to the residents of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. And so let's go to the ground, to a neighborhood, and to an organization that has been very important in that neighborhood. Pacoima Beautiful, Roxy Rivas. She's Deputy Director of Capital Project and Planning. Roxy, welcome, and tell us how you look at this at the ground level there in Pacoima.
Yes, thank you so much, Pilar. And hello and good morning, or almost good afternoon to everyone. My name is Roxy Rivas. My pronouns are they, them. And here at Pacoima Beautiful, we're a community-based organization dedicated to environmental justice and improving the quality of life in the Eastern San Fernando Valley. We focus on creating healthy spaces, green spaces, and advocacy for equitable parks, empowering residents, and making sure that they're a part of this process with us. We host park cleanups. We have created a sidewalk community garden here in Pacoima that you can visit, as well as do advocacy training for parks and open space. We're currently doing this in Panorama City with a group of moms there. And we also have youth programs where we teach them about parks and open space on a regular basis. For us, we really believe that everyone deserves access to and a safe space to vibrant parks. And we have experienced over the last almost 30 years that here in the San Fernando Valley, there's a significant park deficit. Compared to other areas in LA, we have far fewer parks per capita, and parks do not often have enough resources, and they also lack amenities. And for us, what we have also noticed and heard from community is that these amenities are either not up to par, they're completely closed down. Some some restrooms are not able to be used, and a lot of the maintenance has been deferred. For us, what we see the park needs assessment is going to be a crucial tool to really give us the data and the evidence that we already know, but really putting a number to it, to the stories that we hear from community members. And we hope that this provides a comprehensive picture of the current state of our parks here and really identify where the money can go to bring our parks here in the Northeast Valley up to par. The assessment will also help prioritize projects and future projects that community has been asking for many, many years now. The data from the needs assessment can also give direct information and also teach community members about how do these decisions even get made in the first place. I think that's one of the things that's also lacking in our community, and making sure that this is accessible to everyone, particularly out here in the Valley. We hope that a lot of those meetings are held out here, and making sure that you get to hear from our residents as well. For us, what we believe is that community-based organizations like us are essential to the success of the park needs assessment, and we hope that the deep roots that we have with our community are used as an opportunity to really understand the specific needs. And we welcome you to invite us to these meetings, and we will also do our best to get our folks out there as much as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Roxy. And finally, we welcome Francisco Romero from the Prevention Institute. Francisco, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for having us here. As mentioned, my name is Francisco Romero. I'm a program manager working on our healthy, equitable, and built environment communities of practice here as a program manager. And we appreciate the invitation because Prevention Institute, we believe, has been connected to the question of park equity and health and its connection to community since the inception of the founding of our organization. We want to say just a few things. So we don't take time to kind of describe too much of the work we do because we're a national organization doing multiple front work. And I wanted to kind of hone in and focus on like the built environment parks work for today. So what I will say as far as Prevention Institute is concerned is that we try to work with systems in making systemic broader change, and which is why being at the table as a steering committee member is of extreme importance to us. So we're honored to have been a part of, partly invited to be part of this conversation. So my focus for today is gonna be really around the connection between park equity and just park and health equity, right? We believe as Prevention Institute that parks address the 7 dimensions of well-being and health. What are those, right? Cultural, emotional, economic, environmental, intellectual, physical, and social. You might say, what do you mean by intellectual? We mean like, the little ones growing up and learning how to navigate, and learn to be a team player, to, grab onto the playground, ladder and move up, right? Those essential core development pieces, right? Of a human being, right? But all the way to broader social kind of benefits, right? Which we call the multi-benefit kind of lens of how we look at parks. Parks are not as a luxury, but parks as an essential critical infrastructure has been mentioned. We believe that parks are that critical infrastructure that's protecting public health, right? By providing that opportunity for physical activity, time in nature, social connections, as mentioned, and respite, the very much needed rest that we all need. Green spaces also, found in parks, also filter air, remove pollution, they buffer noise, they cool temperatures, they filter stormwater, they replenish groundwater. We want to point to, for example, even with the recent devastating fires and previously with something like the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the critical role that parks play for not only some of the first places that were open for people to get out and relieve some of the stress from being, sheltered in place by being able to go out and catch some air, stretch out our legs, stretch, right? Um, they also played roles in turning into, at a snap of a finger, into food distribution centers, right? Vaccine centers, right? Shelters, right? Medical first aid and mutual aid sites. So parks are that critical. And you saw the map. There's very limited park space, right? So the very few park space they have and access to it becomes even that much more important. This is why we believe it's a matter of really a lifeline, right? The one of the ways we kind of see it is by saying something like, parks are a health and well-being lifeline, right? And this park needs assessment, this endeavor that we're embarking on together here is sort of talking of kind of putting it in a metaphorical way, a diagnosis, right? To see where the park improvements can be made to more surgically and strategically deploy those resources for immediate but also long-term vision, right? To for the health and well-being. We talk about like generational, right? Generational investments. And so when you have the type of approach that we see in the framework that the team have put together for this assessment, the the core pillar that we see as the community engagement piece, sort of what my colleague Roxy was just sharing, right? The importance of having those frontline community organizations and residents speaking, they are the ones that are using it on a day-to-day basis, the park. And so when we're going to get to the park needs, the community identified needs is going to be critical to the kind of formation of the final data driven kind of outlook and based on an equitable framework, right? As mentioned previously by many of our guest panelists today. I want to end just by saying that our experience and myself at Prevention Institute, but previously being part of a local Boyle Heights organization, Proyecto Pastoral Promesa Boyle Heights, we saw that when we were brought into community engagement aspects to improving parks, such as like some of the things that were happening at the county with the Measure A work, that did a similar kind of approach. We want to say that it was so powerful to have that inclusion of the community voices. And we understand that life expectancy, and when we say it's a lifeline, knowing that the parks play a critical role in even life expectancy becomes that much more important. We could share multiple resources around this question. I kind of want to hold back and maybe wait for maybe some guidance around maybe answering questions might be the best thing. But I'll pass it back to the moderator.
Okay. Okay, Francisco, thank you. I know that a lot of what we can think of right now, questions that we have, many of them will be answered by the parks need assessment. But this is for everyone. Give us a peek into what we can expect. So will these planning include new parks, expanding parks that exist, and will include other services inside the parks like recreation? And give us an idea of what the scope of this project is. And this is for anyone that wants to pick it up.
Sure, I can start, and then John, maybe you can help out. So it will include all of those things. So we are looking at existing park sites, what they need, whether or not they should be expanded, and whether or not specific amenities at those parks should be expanded. And we'll also be looking at what areas of the city need to be prioritized for new parks, where there might not be enough parks for the people that are there, either because it's a very dense area or an area that doesn't have enough parks. So we'll be looking at all three of those sort of levels of where are the parks? Are they in the right places? Are existing parks, what do they need? And then at this finest level, we'll be looking at high level between the parks, what it would cost to like do renovations and stuff like that. So we'll be looking at several different layers of those needs to be able to come up with budgets to project into the future how much some of the updates would cost or how much buying new land would cost, et cetera. John, do you want to add to that?
Well, I would also maybe defer first to Jimmy to answer. Do you want to take that question too? There was a question in the chat about Koreatown, which is kind of relevant.
Yeah, so I want to say that, and I think I answered it in the chat there, but I'll just kind of reiterate that we work closely with the council office, all the council offices, to identify different spaces that we can work on securing park spaces, but ultimately it has to do with funding. So this park needs assessment is a very important step in helping us really identify like where the spaces are really needed, as well as how we allocate funding and what the priorities would be as we move forward, right? Because I think every Angeleno will have some disparity in green spaces. And I think this P&A and going through this process and really collectively getting the data and really diving in will help us better move the initiative forward for funding, because ultimately at the end of the day, we're very well aware that it can't be just city money. It would have to come from the voters as well. So that so hopefully that answers the question.
Anyone else wants to add anything? No? Okay. One thing that comes back to us whenever we go out to talk to communities about parks and green spaces in their communities is safety. Many people feel that their parks are not a safe space. Maybe there's people just hanging around. Maybe there's a lot of homeless people that they don't know who they are. What can you tell us about how this is going to address the safety and security of our communities? Anyone?
So that's a really important question. And, we encounter that all the time when we talk about parks is, do people feel, it's great to have a park, but do you feel safe in that park? Do you feel welcome in that park? Because if you don't really have the park. It's and we hear that from communities and all and neighborhoods, neighbors, residents all over the city, and that's a question that we're asking in the survey that is being conducted now. We're doing both a representative, statistically valid, significant survey of the residents of the city, and that survey is also open on, or will be open on the website to anyone who wants to take it and share their perspective. And that will be a question that will, come up as we're also gathering information about the amenities, in existing parks and, what condition the parks are in. As I mentioned, the city has a backlog of deferred maintenance of almost $2.1 billion. And, that addressing and that those conditions and improving those parks is going to be an important part of, making those parks feel and be safe for residents, and so that they feel comfortable there.
Mm-hmm. And I have a question about that just mentioned, and maybe for Jimmy Kim. If Proposition K was offering money every year for the park needs, why are we so behind on upkeep of parks, and why are we so behind? Is it just that the city just is growing too fast? What is going on?
I mean, I think to that point, right? The city is expanding, and the needs and the requirements of Prop K was very specific, right? Again, going through this P&A, going through a funding measure, we're hoping to address, both maintenance and operation of our park system. I am a very firm believer that and I'm reading here in the chat about restroom safety, right? I mean, very often I have young kids at home, and really, if the restrooms aren't accessible, you're only there for just to the amount of time that your kid has to use the restroom, right? Because you don't feel safe, or the restrooms aren't clean. So we're hoping that as we go through this process of collecting data and doing the assessment and surveys, those types of things will kind of come up to the forefront, because it's important, right? We want to make sure that the restrooms are clean, that we have enough funding for operations, because at the end of the day, when you have a lot of programs, right, people will come, right? We are very good. We've been fortunate that we have funding through the 28 Olympics for recreational programs only, but we don't really have funding for the maintenance, the upkeep, capital projects, right? So going through this assessment and going through this survey will hopefully help us kind of write and write a measure that the Angelenos will support, because really it's about how do we get parks more accessible to the community. And really, I think there was a question about spaces in Mexico and in Korea where they're more than just recreational spaces, they're community gathering spaces, and we 100% believe that as well. And the other piece that most people don't know about parks is that it also serves as a secondary emergency function, right? So even during these local fires, we activated our parks for shelter services for those people that were displaced. We activated our parks to do air purifier distributions. So it's really places not just about recreation and green space, but all the secondary things that these parks represent. I mean, during the Northridge earthquake, everybody went into parks, right? And so it's very important that we look at the infrastructure and the availability of parks, because it serves more than just what's defined as a recreation and park space, right? There's other components of park that provides that community, really the anchor to a community.
I have another question, maybe for Jessica, and maybe for the people on the ground, Francisco and Roxy. Are there any innovative ways to bring parks to diverse populations in dense areas that don't have a lot of space? Are we looking at places that are doing things that are out of the ordinary or new?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is we are looking at some options, and we're currently doing a study of other cities across the country and what are some interesting and innovative programs. And so we're going to be benchmarking compared to other cities to see what programs are out there. Some interesting things that are happening around pop-ups. So in smaller areas, where can pop-up parks happen? We're also looking at joint use. How does RAP already works with the Unified School District on several sites to provide access on non-school days to parks. So that's another opportunity. And then we're also looking at how parks overlap with some of the water systems items that are happening in LA. So many of you might be familiar with water quality improvement goals for the Los Angeles area. And in some areas, parks overlap some of the highest priority areas for water quality improvement need as well. So when we think about that, we're thinking about multi-benefit opportunities where we can get park benefit, but also environmental and water benefits too. So those give us some good opportunities to think about what's possible. And we're also looking at how many parks would it take to serve communities that don't currently have access to parks. And that will be one of the big studies that comes out of this, and to see are there any surplus lands in the city or other lands that could be purchased that would help meet some of those needs too in the coming years? I did want to add something that I didn't mention, but over the last 25 years, RAP has added over 1,000 acres of parkland to the park system. So that is really exciting in the 25 years to have that addition. So things are happening. We recognize that there are still communities that don't have enough parkland. But as we add land and as we add parks, we also have to think about the budget, because during that same period over the past 25 years, RAP's budget, when you take into account inflation and different things that RAP has had to pay for, has not gone up at the same level as that acreage has gone up. So we really need to be looking into the future how to fund a strong park system that also has enough park acreage for all people here in LA.
Okay. Anyone else? I don't know if
Francisco has
Roxy
his
or
hand up.
Francisco. Yeah,
Francisco.
Francisco, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I'll try to capture just some thoughts on what's being shared. So not to take up more of mic, but in regards to safety, we believe that safety through design and safety through activation is critical to the questions that were being brought up. I've had the benefit of working alongside the city of Los Angeles and multiple districts through the work that we're doing, and have seen how the the bringing together of the different departments within the city to really envision again the global aspect of how a park can be designed. For example, just to come online, this year there's already construction happening under the bridge, the Sixth Street newly built Sixth Street Bridge. What I can say there is that community input and how the design's going to look has been instrumental to not only some of the more folkloric kind of pieces, but also the structures, right? But also the way that the community has brought together. Like for example, somebody brought up the placita question, right? That's a must for communities like that are going to be accessing that particular park, and that came out in these very intentional community engagement design, which is what an innovative thing that this park needs assessment process is bringing about is the community partner activation, like the program, and really activating and reaching those residents by bringing together those organizations that are on the ground and on the front line and have that trusted messenger kind of connection to the residents. And so I just wanted to kind of globally say answer a few of the questions that were brought up in the chat by saying that there is a lot of intention behind the community centered kind of approach to having not only what the needs are, but in the future, like how the park's going to be designed and when those facilities are being built, and not only those facilities, but the stormwater capture, the trees, the type of plants even, right? Like even the artwork, everything, and even the historical kind of markers that are kind of placed there within each of those spaces, small or large, right? Because we're talking from pocket parks to something like, and I'll answer this, Hollenbeck Park is my favorite park, one of the larger ones that we have in the city. And so I'll pause there. Thank you.
And
Okay,
then
so
if I can just
Yeah.
chime in really quick, Pilar, I promise I won't take too much.
yes.
I wanted to share, I think this concept, I shared a resource here, but I think this concept of multi-benefit projects is gonna be like top of mind and has been for Pacoima Beautiful. This is one project that we have worked on and have built in our community in Pacoima is the Bradley Alley and Plaza. It is owned by LADOT. It used to be a through street that we have permanently closed off to vehicles, and it's now being used by the community. I just came this morning. We had a few we didn't. The HACLA RAC, which is the resident group part of HACLA, they had a food distribution, but we support them because they love this space. So this is just a gathering space that people come out and use. We've seen quinceañeras thrown here. We've seen all sorts of different use that happens here. And then we also just came back from visiting this park that was done by LA County Public Works, where it's a stormwater capture project, but it's a park. And, it has its parks features and it's really cool. And so this concept of multi-benefit projects and how you can combine different funding streams in order to not only build them, but to operate and maintain them is going to be crucial. But something else that we're thinking about at Pacoima Beautiful is how do we use our tributaries that are permanently closed off and have been to the general public and creating them into a multi-use benefit space. For us particularly, it's the Pacoima Wash. We are finishing our feasibility study for it. And so making sure that what comes out of it is not only shared with the general public, but really understanding some of both the opportunities that arise, but also some of the challenges of transforming a tributary into a linear park potentially. So those are all ideas that we've been really grappling with, knowing that places like Pacoima and the Northeast Valley are already super dense with, we're developed. That's the reality of it. So how do we think of other spaces to do those kinds of things. And then the last thing that I'll share is we came back from a trip that we took to Atlanta to learn about some of the work that's happening there. And of course, they have the Beltline, which is an amazing project. It was really cool and inspiring to see. But they're also thinking of creating these like mini parks where they're transforming a street that's overlooking the city and adding some trees and canopy to it. So there's a lot of different creative things that are happening at the national and even global scale. And so how do we bring those ideas to the table here in LA?
Okay, great. Let's talk about the funding issue. Obviously, you want to you want some kind of initiative or proposition to be put on the ballot to come out of this that will fund these efforts over the next, I don't know how many years. But will LA City have come up with enough money for this? Will it need money from the federal government? And if so, you know what the question is. It involves equity. So the current federal administration is not sympathetic to equity. So what's your thinking about this? Anyone?
So, and this, this kind of, I also addressed Peter Sherman's question in the chat about how aligned are decision makers and elected officials in LA with the vision presented here, and and reflected in the needs assessment, and they're very much aligned. Many of them are very actively participating, the city council members, their staff, the neighborhood councils in those council districts, as well as the mayor, the deputy mayor for infrastructure, Randall Winston, sits on the steering committee for the needs assessment. I think the elected officials and decision makers very much recognize that this is the right approach to putting a very thoughtful, well-documented, comprehensive needs assessment and then a funding proposal in front of the voters that's based on that needs assessment, that this is the path forward to secure stable, ongoing funding for parks in Los Angeles. And so that's very exciting to see that there is that kind of alignment. I think your question about the federal government, is a good one. We do also see that there's alignment with these goals around parks as being important for health, essential infrastructure, being important for equity and for climate resiliency in the state of California. But clearly, we've seen a dramatic change in a dizzying, head-spinning change in the last, what has it been? It's maybe 5 or 6 weeks only,
10 years?
at the federal. It sure feels like more than a year, right, already, but that's going to be a challenge. I that's not a big part of the picture for city parks, that federal fund. It can be important for creating some new parks. The Land and Water Conservation Fund, for example, has been incredibly important, and so far we've not seen the Trump administration go after that. And it does really focus on high need areas in high need urban areas for creating parks, and supports that with funding. There's funding from that fund to help create and build a new state park on the LA River, for example. And they may need, a lot of these funding programs are changing some of their language, and that might happen. But I don't think it's going to change the commitment of Los Angeles and of California to those values.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, speaking to your question about how this could come out. There are individuals in the city that are putting together a coalition to consider what funding mechanisms could be done. So it could be a council-generated initiative, it could be a citizen-generated initiative, but there are ways that different measures could be pursued. The information of this parks needs assessment is really essential to being able to set what those amounts might be. Proposition K provided approximately $25 million a year for improvements in parks. It was a 30-year measure from 1996 to 2026. As that expires, parks are certainly facing a shortage. Other funding sources that come in for parks, like we said, state, federal, county funding, as well as other agency funding when projects are done with a multi-benefit look. And there are philanthropic foundations that also partner with the park systems. So there are different methods that are funding, but some of the more significant ones, like we've said, are expiring. Looking at what the scale of that could be is certainly an effort that a lot of advocates are thinking about right now in parallel to this effort.
Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left. Let's go back to that fun question about what's your favorite park? And I would add, I want to know why. John?
Well, I answered it. My favorite park is always like the new one that's being built in a neighborhood that doesn't currently have a park. And so those are happening all over the city, with funding from different sources. And, we want to see more of those. But that's where I always get a thrill is like seeing a new park open.
Yeah. And Jimmy Kim left the room. He had to go to a meeting and he said, every park in the city, because he's the general manager. So let's move on to Jessica. What's your favorite?
So I live just on the south side of Los Angeles, downtown, between downtown and the University of Southern California. And in my neighborhood, I live by St. James Park, and it's just a very small park. It's not fancy, but I love that park. I end up there most days on a walk or something like that. And to me, that just speaks to how important when you have these urban areas that are dense, where we're living close, where we don't all have our own front yard. It's so important. That becomes my front yard. That's my neighbor's front yards. And so I would say St. James Park.
All right, cool. Roxy? Need to unmute, I think.
I'll say two parks, one in Pacoima and one in my hometown in Silmar. My favorite park in Pacoima is David M. Gonzalez. We host a lot of events out of that park, and it's centrally located. It's right next to an artery street, Van Nuys Boulevard. And they have an amazing group of staff there. We've gotten to know them really well over the years, and they have really awesome programming, especially during the summer. For the kids. And we've done movie nights there. We've done other engagements and fairs there with community partners. So it's a really great space. Highly recommend. And then my favorite place to play basketball, because there's a lot of basketball courts there, is Carrizo Park. I've been playing that sport since I was 5 years old. And so for me, any park that has a basketball court is an awesome space.
All right. Francisco?
Yes, I mentioned earlier, Allenbeck Park is my favorite. I visit almost every single day after I pick up my kiddo that goes to school just down the street from there. The reason I love it is, well, first of all, it's about to get some tender loving care through $20 million plus investment through by programs that have been reached through a process like the one we're embarking on that took some time to get to. So, but the reason I love it is because you do feel like that although it's there's a freeway that goes right over it and is kind of contaminated, that's going to change with this new investment. And the poor little turtles that are in there are going to get some fresh water that they've been waiting for. There's ducks. Of course, I mentioned the lake. It's an iconic place where a lot of folks will take pictures. But there are sections on the trails that you're walking that all of a sudden you feel like you're actually up in like a forest for a quick second. And even for that quick second, with all those trees that are there and cultural kind of features there, like the stage, et cetera, and the playground, it's a mecca. If you go there on any weekend, you'll have people picnicking, you'll have people playing, you'll have people. kind of skipping rocks. It's just a beautiful place, and it's down the street from in the neighborhood there, one of the most park poor neighborhoods in all of Los Angeles.
Well, thank you so much to everyone for this presentation. So important for the future of LA and all of us, and for our colleagues also to come who came and covered this. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend.